When the Nintendo Direct dropped, I had an absolute ball playing through Killer Instinct again. I haven't put a significant amount of time into the game in years, right? Never really cared for it. Thought it was overrated. Mortal Kombat's better, Street Fighter's better. There are dozens of better fighting games on other consoles, right? There are just Killer Instinct never did it for me. Never was impressive. I've talked about this extensively on stream, but I actually did stop and play through like the arcade ladder in Killer Instinct 1. I played Cinder. I learned that one easy combo you can do by just mashing forward and Y over and over again. And I managed to stomp like, all these terrible CGI looking monstrosities, right? Idol might be the most boring looking final boss in a fighting game I've ever seen in my life, right? I don't care for Killer Instinct, right? But I had fun. Like there's a certain amount of nostalgia in Killer Instinct 1995, the SNES port, right? I like the music, I like a lot of the stage designs, I like some of the aspects of it. Like the issue with the game is I think is that there are just so many better alternatives, right? Like why would I bother learning KI when I could like play Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter, right? To me, like there are just so many other better alternatives. And I've always freely acknowledged that. Killer Instinct is something I grew up with. I'm a I compared it to other fighting games at the time, and I dropped it very quickly for other better alternatives. I dropped it for Mortal Kombat 2, right? Mortal Kombat 2 by itself was so much more of an interesting experience for me. Discovering all the cool fatalities, learning each character, discovering each stage secret. Like fighting the hidden fighters. Getting to the top of the ladder. Like there's so much cool stuff hidden in MK2 that makes it, in my opinion, one of the best fighting games of all time, right? I love MK2, right? I've always spoken out about that. I consider it like I would say it's my favorite fighting game on Super Nintendo, right? Like Killer Instinct could never compete, right? So imagine my surprise when like I joined the YouTube gaming community and I realized that there's like a lot of fanatics out there. People like Maximilian Dude and Matt McBustles who are trying to tell you that like, oh, Killer Instinct, it's one of the best fighting games ever. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I wish they would bring it back. Like they did this for years, and then like Microsoft announced Killer Instinct 2013, right? The game came out and there was this really weird, kind of unprecedented push from the community uh, to try and present this idea that Killer Instinct 2013 was legit. One of the best fighting games ever made, a great revival to the franchise, a great addition to like the KI lore and like the setup and like a great Xbox One exclusive, right? The narrative, which I believe continues to this day, is that Killer Instinct 2013 is a legitimately great fighting game. And I, as someone who played the original, who experimented a little with Killer Instinct 2013, uh, me, the casual fighting game fan, like I looked at these claims and I laughed, right? Because they obviously aren't true, right? Is Killer Instinct talked about today? Is it played today? Does it have like did it leave any impact? Is it played at tournaments? Do people talk about it? No. Killer Instinct, I think, was something that was heavily shilled by the FGC in an attempt to try and like bolster their roster for that year. Like it's so strange to see people like Maximilian Dude come out and try to call this like a legitimately great fighting game. Something that looks awkward, something that looks janky, something that's like hard to learn, something that's like outclassed by other better fighting games, right? Like in that regard, I don't think Killer Instinct 2013 is much different from the original game, right? Like, I don't think there's anything special, unique, or interesting about Killer Instinct 2013. And all the videos I've seen on the subject, people talking about what a great revival for the franchise it is, like, they have done nothing to convince me that, like, there's something I'm missing out on, that there's some spectacular reason to play Killer Instinct on Xbox One, right? Like, from what I experienced with the game, what I've seen other people do, like what I've heard, like it feels forced. It feels fake. It feels a lot like the build up to that hype around Sea of Thieves, right? where people were like hyping this up as like, oh man, it's this open world pirate adventure with MMO elements, and you're gonna be like looking for treasure, like it's gonna be the best rare project in years, right? Like it is people trying to coast off of Rareware's good name, right? Microsoft is still trying to present Rare as like a top tier studio, as if they're anywhere near what they were during the 90s, right? That to me was a really blatant attempt at it. Of like trying to gaslight people into thinking Killer Instinct was like some spectacular thing, right? They seem to understand that like Rareware still has like this commands a lot of respect in the industry. You know, I have kids in my family who still play Rareware games, right? Like stuff in the 90s, who still love that stuff, like Donkey Kong Country, DK64. You know, it's really popular among kids even today, right? And I think Microsoft understood that, right? You know, it's why they put out that Battletoads game, right? It's why they tried to bring back Killer Instinct. It's why they tried to bill like Sea of Thieves as like their big thing. Like they are trying to own, or at least they were trying to own the idea that like, oh, we own Rareware now. We own one of the best game studios in the world. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't you want to support Rareware? You know, Nintendo fan? And the answer is no, right? Like I have seen nothing positive from Rareware's acquisition of Xbox. You know, Grab by the Ghoulies, Cameo, Viva Pinata, Perfect Dark Zero, all of that was crap, right? Like none of it lived up to what we were seeing from the N64 era, right? And anybody with any real standards like noticed that almost immediately, right? The only people who stuck around were like probably just massive Xbox cocksuckers, right? Like I'm sure they exist, right? You know, I don't talk to these people and I don't care about them, but like I'm sure they exist, right? And yeah, like sometimes this kind of attitude, you know, this blind worship for the Xbox brand, it it bleeds into relevant game discourse, right? Like in this specific instance, like they were trying to build Killer Instinct as the best exclusive fighting game IP on Xbox. You know, something that you could buy an Xbox for and enjoy it, right? And the reality is, Killer Instinct 2013 was not that good. You know, I had no interest in playing the game. I only played it on Game Pass. I experienced like a couple of rounds of it. Didn't care for it. Didn't enjoy it. Like the game was not spectacular in any way, shape, or form. And I think if the game really was that good, if it did have an audience, if it did do well, why have we not gotten a sequel? Right? That is the reality here, right? That game came out in like 2013, right? You know, what did we get? Like Mortal Kombat 9 came out in 2011, right? We got 5 by 2015, 9 by 2019, 11 by 2019, and then 1 this year, like last year, right? You know, 1 every like 3 or 4 years, right? What has Killer Instinct done since 2013? We've gotten 3 Mortal Kombat games since that game came out. And yeah, you can argue they're bad, but like I think the difference with Mortal Kombat, like Mortal Kombat fans are willing to admit that the games have gotten worse. We're willing to admit that there's an issue with quality and like keeping the games interesting and fresh and original, right? Like there's an issue there. But like I never saw any Killer Instinct 2013 fan acknowledge that there was no real growth or evolution from the 90s version, right? Killer Instinct 2013 was not what it was hyped up to be. It was not a spectacular fighting game. It was not an Xbox must have product. It was not a particularly good revival of a Nintendo developed IP. It was a complete waste of everyone's time and attention, right? Like I was not impressed with Killer Instinct 2013.